Eating out. It is the one topic almost everybody loves to talk about, and everybody has an opinion. Now, I am game for anything myself. I like fast food burgers. I like food halls. I like award-winning chefs. I'm always up to eat wherever and then to talk about it. And that is why I love talking with Phil Colicchio. Phil is an attorney. He represents James Beard award-winning chefs, restaurateurs, celebrity chefs. Phil was a pioneer in the Las Vegas restaurant boom, and he's also an expert on food halls. And for all those reasons and a bunch more, I love talking with Phil Colicchio. Live from Las Vegas, it's Where We Buy. That's right, you're listening to Where We Buy. It's the show where we talk with retail experts and we visit the places where we buy. My name is James Cook.
And I'm Keisha Virtue.
And we both research retail and real estate for JLL. So we're live at the JLL booth at ICSC Las Vegas 2025. Welcome, Phil.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So, yeah.
Las Vegas. It's what everybody says it is.
And so much more.
It is.
So much more.
It is.
So I want to talk about this. I alluded to this because I was checking out your bio, the Las Vegas restaurant boom, which I think people are aware of. But for the folks that aren't, like, what was that? What was the story about that?
It came down to a realization about 25 years ago that crystallized about 20 years ago that there was a lot of money to be made in the food and beverage industry in Las Vegas, likely overall more than in the gaming side. Now, the profitability is very different, but the revenue generation was the thing that put it over the top. And that was when you first saw the idea of licensing come to pass, where a famous chef would be solicited is one way to say it, seduced is a better way.
Oh, no.
Yeah, to say, hey, would you put your restaurant out here? We'll build it for you, and we'll run it for you. But you need to help train our teams, and we'll pay you a nice royalty in order to license your name and your image, which today we call NIL. But back then we just called it, a license to put your face on
IL image
screen.
license.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it took off like a rocket ship out here, changed the world.
Now, when you're licensing your brand to a restaurant that you didn't actually construct, like, is there a danger that you lose quality control over that?
Always. Yeah. You mentioned the fact, though, that I'm a lawyer, and I appreciate that, and also a consultant. But back 20 years ago, when we were negotiating these agreements for the first time, I had the good luck of being a real estate lawyer that started to help food and beverage talent because my cousin Tom, who's become pretty well known in the food and beverage world, he's a brilliant chef. Always like to give him a pat on the back to say I believe he's still the only one who has both a James Beard Best Chef Award and an Emmy Award.
Wow.
But I had to take care of my cousin back then. And so I had to make sure that his brand would not get diluted. So in those early contracts, we negotiated hard for quality control. And that became standard. So you're anytime you give up your eyes and your ears and your nose and your taste buds to a third party, and yet your name is still the reason people are walking in the restaurant, you should go to bed at night afraid, and take care to make sure that the quality's there.
Yeah. Was that your first foray into kind of what your world is now, the food world, or were you doing that before?
Yeah. No, the first component of it was literally, a lot of people think that my cousin Tom called me. It was not. It was his mother. My Aunt Beverly called and said, Philip, I think Tommy's in trouble. Can you help him? And Tom, it was a small family, Tom wasn't really in trouble. But as it turned out, the first time we really looked at his business structure, it was not a structure. So, again, 25, maybe even a little bit longer years ago, we put a structure around him. And I dusted my hands off and I said, okay, this should work. I was not yet aware of the sway that Tom had in the world of chefs. He was a very highly respected young chef at that time. And before I knew it, my phone was ringing off the hook from chefs around the world saying, can you do for me what you just did for Tom? Because Tom was walking around buttoned up in a world that was not buttoned up. And that's how it all began. It's kind of a funny story. I'll tell it. It was very easy for me to work with the retail world and the real estate world because I was a real estate lawyer. I was a Brooks Brothers suit, big firm lawyer, and I could speak their language. And when I first came out here to Las Vegas with Tom and walked into the president of MGM Grand, they laughed, and I was a little embarrassed. And they said, but we were kind of expecting a Joe Pesci character, my cousin Vinny, right? Thinking like, oh, this is like Tom's bringing his cousin out.
Oh, okay,
right.
got it.
And
Right.
so this moment of like, wow, I better kind of clear up with people before I come out that no, I'm a real lawyer, and button up, let's go.
So, sorry.
No, it was great because then within a year I was representing the hotels because I could speak chef and I could speak real estate. And so when they were going across outside the country for chefs and food and beverage, they would ask me to help negotiate those deals because their in-house people didn't have expertise in that area. And there were very few people outside in the legal world who had that experience. So it was interesting.
So yeah, you've got to speak two different languages. You've got to speak lawyer and you've got to speak chef.
Yes, you do.
So the most recent thing that we were talking about is Keisha and I wrote a report on the kind of the economics and the structure of putting a celebrity chef restaurant in a hotel. Plug it. It's on JLL.com.
It's a great article.
Your name is in it because you're a contributing insight. Well, how would I say that? You are our subject matter expert.
Okay.
Very helpful in that. So folks need to check that out. Totally very cool stuff. Let's move on, though, because something you mentioned as we were prepping before the show was entertainment.
Yeah.
And how that plays a component. Tell me what you meant by that.
Sure. Well, a little bit of background into that. So about 7 or 8 years ago now, I left the full-time practice of law and along with my business partner, Trip Schneck, created Colicchio Consulting, a consulting firm that, and at the end of the day, we're real estate consultants. We help the real estate industry better understand the food, beverage, and entertainment world. They're so critical. They're critical pieces to every real estate project. It used to be that you built the project and then you thought about amenities. Now you better think about your amenities before you build your project. And if you are doing adaptive reuse, all the better, because you really have to think about the signatures that you want. As food, beverage, and entertainment have evolved, and the nature of what we all know as the experiential component of those things, which became a big word about 4 years ago, 5 years ago. Experiential retail, experiential everything.
Yep.
That turned out to be real. It wasn't just a made-up real estate word. And in particular, the millennial and Generation Z consumers, guests, as I like to call them, I still don't like it when people call them consumers, are absolutely committed to their time out, right? And so if they're dining, there's going to be more on the table, pardon the pun, than just dining. And so if we're going to eat food or have a drink, we want to be entertained as well, either before, during, or after. And now we are seeing consistently, particularly with new developments, that there are adjacencies of what I would call venues that are programmable. And by that, I mean, they could be hosting music one night. They could be hosting a bar mitzvah the next afternoon. They could be a wedding venue. But most often, it's live performance. And live performance still is powerful out there as an attention grabber, and frankly, as an economic driver. It gets all of the sales on, beverage sales, food sales, and keeps people, for instance, in a food hall, will keep them in the food hall longer. And that's really what you want. I hate to be as gauche as to say, and they'll spend more, because it's not always about that. It's more about making sure they come back. Right? So.
Can you talk about are you able to talk about any projects you're working on?
Yeah, sure.
Give us some examples.
There's a fantastic little project that we've been showing off to everyone who's telling us they want to do a food hall. And it's a little project in a town called Roswell, Georgia, outside of Atlanta. And this is called The Junction. And it began as a food hall concept only. And we goosed them a little bit to say, we might want to make some room in the design for entertainment. And they said, well, we have a building next door that we didn't know what to do with. So why don't we make that a small music venue? And it has killed it, both economically and socially. 7 nights a week, it's busy. There's live performance every night. And it's not just, sometimes you see, I'm not a fan of sort of the corporate vibe. I've never gotten a lot of joy out of going to the Hard Rock Cafe or things like that, right? I like things that are a little offbeat. This place is a little offbeat. And there's challenges because, hey, the big groups out there, and I don't mean the performance groups, I mean the groups like, AEG and Live Nation, who control booking, have a lot to say about who performs. But when you're talking about these small venues where, a singer-songwriter, they're looking for places like this to play. And people are looking for that connection to see who the next great singer-songwriter is going to be. And it's working. We're doing another terrific project that's really they're starting to swing hammers in a cool little town on the west coast side of Florida called Dunedin. I only knew Dunedin because I'm a baseball fan, and I knew that the Minnesota Twins had their spring training facility there.
Gotcha.
But a developer in Dunedin, recognized that, all right, Florida's got this influx of people, particularly from Northeast, that have moved down here. They're doing a full-on restaurant, food hall, performance venue in this little town of Dunedin that already has actually a sophisticated local playhouse. So they've already seen how that playhouse changes the economics of the town on the night that there are performances, and they're laying into that. We're super excited about that one. And then just today, James, since you asked, we signed an agreement to consult for this terrific group in the next boom town in America. Write it down.
Okay.
Lubbock, Texas.
I don't need to write it down. I'll remember it.
All right.
Because of my surprise at you saying that.
Yeah. So first of all, Lubbock is the home of Texas Tech University.
Okay.
And in Texas, the universities rule the social scenes in the regions. Texas Tech happens to be a huge school with a big campus, big medical componentry. And it's not close to Houston, and it's not close to Dallas, and it's not close to Fort Worth, but it has what you want. It's got character coming out of its pores and a neglected downtown that a group of what they used to call town fathers, right? The guys who've been successful in their fields of endeavor actually have acquired a couple of buildings. Mm. And in order to get the downtown moving again, they felt us out. They found us, our consulting group. We went down and spent 3 or 4 days with them, recognized that every venue that existed for entertainment and food was packed every night. Packed. And, Texas, just like Florida, a lot of incoming humans moving there for reasons that are economic and political, but mostly because of the universities. And we just signed a deal to do this project in Lubbock that's going to have a rooftop bar, a food hall, a restaurant, a sports bar, and an adjacent music venue.
That's awesome.
And we're so excited about it because I don't know about you, but for me, you can do something in Las Vegas and in New York, and you feel as if you should be proud that you helped accomplish something. When you help change a town, there's a special pride in that. And it's still on paper, but I've been to Lubbock, and I'm telling you, put it on your map. You'll wind up doing a podcast there someday.
I can't wait. Well, so for a project like that, your role is, tell me what your role, what do you do?
What we do, we're live.
So there's people walking by and they're waving.
Who recognize me.
And you win the podcast if you're able to keep your conversation going while also waving at people.
Yeah, I lost on that one.
Okay, so Lubbock.
So here's what we do. The developers, we will usually engage with the developers, and what we will do first with our consulting group is to perform an agnostic feasibility study. We do that with economics and market through dead-on, classic roll up your sleeves, put your boots on research. Certainly there's a lot you can get online, but there's no research like boots on the ground. We complete what we call a feasibility study, which includes a floor plan. And from the floor plan, we can interpret the kind of square footage we have and the number of, in a food hall, the number of food stalls, bars, the most important part of any food hall, the beverage program. And then we see what else we can do with it. We charge a fee for that. We give it to the client. If the client sees potential, we're often asked for our opinion and we'll give it, but for the most part, we'd like to be agnostic about it. Say, look, here's the data. If you want to move forward, we can become advocates for you and for the project. And very often, since we've gotten that detail work in, when the project pencils, we do wind up working on phase 2, which includes helping them find a really good designer, architect. That's very important. It's like one of probably the top of the 4 pillars, which I'll tell you in a minute. And then we help them structure the economics. If they're going to do a food hall, you need somebody who's experienced to operate the food hall. We will help them find a group by bringing at least 3 to 5 alternatives to the table for these developers. And then we will help them with curation and also with programming, like I've talked about earlier. On the restaurant side, we also do an economic pro forma. Again, based upon the size and style, we still do an awful lot. There's no other word for it but curating, which I don't like that word. But in the restaurant world, we are very often called upon to find, the right group for the project that we're working on. And that's still very satisfying. In the food hall world, building these things from ground up, from an idea to a completed project, that's still really exciting. We all thought the food hall thing we knew it was important, and we definitely knew that it was not just a light trend, but what we're seeing in the outside of the coast areas, like New York City, different, LA different, inside of those two bogeys, the food hall movement is powerful, very strong, and in particular because there are so many things you can do with the space.
What do you think the difference is now with food halls? Where are the trends shifting based compared to where it was several years ago?
Sure. Really, I'd love to say that I'm a trendsetter. I'm not. I'm a follower and a student, right? And just like you are. And so we quickly realized that the first food halls that were super popular, right? The urban spaces, things like that in New York, we realized as restaurant people, they forgot about the bar. Like, what do you mean? There's no great bar in here. And if there is a bar, it's an afterthought. What that led to, unfortunately, was pre-COVID, a robust 9-to-5 business where people would come in and grab something in the morning, feel like they were seeing a lot of humans, grabbing something delicious and quick at lunchtime, maybe happy hour, right? But always it was kind of cool food, right? Interesting food. Food is literally in a food hall. It sounds ridiculous. It's the least important thing. It really is, right? I talked about these pillars, right? If you don't have the right design, if you don't have the right programming, if you don't have the right operator, it doesn't matter how good your food is. It's not going to work. So we saw the need to emphasize beverage programs. We saw the need, and we believed, and it turned out we were right, that if we made the beverage programs better by designing the space better, that meant it would lift up the food vendors significantly, and their hours would increase, and the hours that the people coming there would increase. Then we recognized that, well, gee, we've got them here at night for the bar. They need to be entertained. Let's make sure that there's something for them to come back for. Now, the simplest thing, right, and we see this every day, simplest thing was, okay, trivia night. Well, that sounds, right, it sounds old. Let me tell you what, trivia is like a blood sport.
Yeah.
And people come out
for real.
Yeah.
It is.
And they come out and compete. And so now you've seen the phrase in our industry that I hate it, but it's the right phrase, competitive socializing, right? That used to mean beer league softball, right? But now it's like, how's your trivia team? Like, are you undefeated? So we've seen that kind of evolution, and that's really what it is. And you're very right to focus on, hey, how's it changed and how's it continue to evolve?
What are the must-haves in a food hall in terms of vendors? Like, what are the slots that you can't have a food hall if you don't have coffee, right? But what else?
Wow, you know what? That's that you're not gonna like that I'm gonna take you to task on that.
Oh no,
I am.
Okay, let's hear it.
I'll tell you why. No, first, great question. Must-haves. You got to have a lot of handhelds. All right. So think about that first, right? Because the idea of a food hall usually means we're moving. Sometimes we're eating on the move, but mostly, right, we're sitting. But think in terms of, right, handhelds. What are the best handhelds that come to your mind, right? Well, they usually, what do we all know, right? A burger.
Yep.
Sure. A burrito, a taco, of course, right? A chicken finger, right? A chicken sandwich. Well, the most popular stall in most food halls is the Mexican food stall. It is because it's comfortable, often creative, and almost always has great handheld stuff. Now, bowls are important too, right? And again, evolving. But we think you can't have a great food hall without a terrific Mexican, because just about everybody loves it. The burger component, it's important in some food halls, less important in others. The fried chicken sandwich is very important. You can't get away from it. And if I were a chicken, I'd be running scared, right? And we always joke about the poor chicken that if it didn't taste good, it would be extinct, right? It has nothing but predators out there, and we're the biggest ones. But you mentioned coffee. Well, what we have learned, and this is an absolute, this is not a maybe, coffee on its own will not hold up in a food hall. There are not, these are never places that are Starbucksy, right? They are a little more focused, smaller, right? Clearly don't have the same kind of marketing capacity. That means during the day that coffee sales will die down. So what we have done, the coffee is very important, but we also learned that for real coffee snobs, right? And the biggest coffee snobs are the ones who own coffee shops. Their product cost is tough, right? And if you're in a food hall, and very often you're paying a licensing fee as opposed to rent to the owner, and it's usually in the neighborhood of 20 to 25%. Your food costs have to be lower than that, and it's hard. So what we have found, again, adapt, right? Adapt and overcome. Coffee is hugely important, but it also has to service usually some baked goods and very often ice cream, right?
Okay.
Right. So it's coffee and.
Got it.
And that turns out to work. The best thing that ever happened to food hall coffee has been the very, very strong and important movement of cold brew it's hugely important. And we don't think about the economics of coffee. Cold brew changed the game in the economics of coffee because kids drink it. constantly. They do not drink hot coffee, period. But they'll drink cold brew all day and all night.
Wow, that's fascinating. Oh, I'm so glad I asked you about that. I'm learning stuff here. So if you go on your website for Colicchio Consulting, there's like a page of chefs that you've worked with, and there's a lot of names there that people are probably familiar with. And I always wondered, what's it like to work? Because chefs are often known to have big personalities to begin with, and then ones that are in the eye of the media and are well known that way. What's it like to work with a celebrity chef?
Most of the time, it's a joy.
Okay.
Most of the time, and here's why. And again, I'm so fortunate. You know, someday I'll write a book. My wife always tells me I should, but the lawyer in me says I get sued. So
The lawyer knows about libel.
yeah. Most chefs over the age of 35, men and women, did not get into the restaurant industry to become famous. They were in the industry because it was a calling. I have always said, and I get to get on a soapbox because I teach at the Culinary Institute of America in the graduate school programs, and I get to help these students think about these things. But it's almost as if you don't choose to be a chef. It chooses you. Back in the old days, before media was all over the food and beverage world, you know, usually somebody went to culinary school because they were a bad student in normal academic environments. It turns out that the kitchen is the perfect place for an ADD creative. It is. So when most of the chefs that I have worked with and gotten to meet who are famous, A, again, did not seek that out. B, they do have some component of ADD, right? And they recognize that they're fortunate. So they're pretty easy. You do get a few, again, and not a sexist term, you get a few divas who become infatuated with fame. Having grown up with somebody who became famous, everybody should have the opportunity to grow up with somebody close to them who becomes famous, because you will get an insight into how people behave towards a famous person that will scare you. And you think that these people are being aloof and things like that. They're not. They have to develop a skin, because I've seen it time and time again. I'm walking, again, I'll use my cousin Tom as an example. Most well-meaning person in the world will come up and say, Tom, I see you all the time. You know that dish on season 3 of Top Chef where that Kevin prepared and you know, I try to do it at home. And of course now, you know, 7 years ago, 1,000 episodes earlier of this show, but that person saw the show last night.
Yeah.
Right? Tom can't say, please get out of my face with this. You know, he has to be at least polite, and he always is. But these sometimes are scary situations because an intimacy develops. I'm sure the same is true with your podcasting and with radio. You hear about it a lot with radio people, that they say that they have such an intimate relationship with their listeners who they don't know, but the listener feels like they know them. Yeah. So if they ever get to meet them, it becomes a very intimate moment for them. Most of the chefs I work with handle that pretty well. And they really appreciate that people recognize them and like what they do. You know, but there's still quiet time that's required in a human life. We have had a few scenarios. One very famous chef, I won't name, that had a real anger problem that almost wrecked a couple of careers. And that was really hard to deal with because it was everybody's fault but chef, you know? And to be fair, a lot of attention came upon this person very quickly, and they were not emotionally ready for it. Mm. And it could have gone very badly, you know. But thankfully, that was long enough ago that the chef has sort of took some time off, got a lot of help, and it is still very important and influential. But boy, it was the worst side of human behavior. It's tough.
Wow.
Interesting.
So there's all kinds.
It's hard in the kitchen. It's hard in there.
Oh my God. I watched,
Hard in there.
Hot stuff.
I'm sure you've seen the show The Bear.
Sure, yeah.
And when I was in college, I worked in a pizza kitchen and I thought that was stressful, but The Bear is like 100 times more than that. Jeez.
The Bear was right up until, I have to say this because I enjoy the show, but right up until the moment that the cousin like spent a week in a 3-star Michelin restaurant.
Oh, that was
entertaining. And then became like a great general manager. That's a crock of you know what.
Right, but it was a great TV.
It was. But I will tell you, the building out of the restaurant at the beginning, that was very accurate. The idea of the money that goes flying out the door. Here's the thing about this. It's very stressful. The money's flying out the door and you have no income. You don't have any income until you have guests. And then when you have guests, you better have 90 to 180 days worth of working capital, because there's no way you're making enough money in those first months to pay your staff, to buy your food product, to pay your rent. I mean, this is why restaurants crash. When we talk about, 20 some % don't make it through year one, there's a good reason for that.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a brutal business.
It's really brutal to survive 5 years. So you touched a little bit on the cuisine that's important for food halls. So why do we look at fine dining? What are we seeing as far as trends in cuisine? Are there certain cuisines that are more in demand now?
What a really great question. The cuisine that seems to be prevalent in the United States now is everyone seems to want a touch of low country. The South Carolina, almost New Orleans type things, right? And that's nice. And it's very delicious in my estimation. It is not super complex, but the flavors pop. And that's the thing that I think chefs love, right? When they can make something really pop. Again, back to my cousin, Tom became famous as a chef because he could, by sourcing the right ingredients, could make I still remember the review from the New York Times that he redefined carrotness. And it wasn't because
that's a New York Times phrase right there, isn't it?
Well, but what he did was he was able to secure great product and then let it speak for itself by cooking it properly without saucing it up. So when we talk about cuisines, in New York, there's been a big influx of going back to classic French, right? And very expensive classic French. Café Carmelini is a great example. What Jean-Georges Vangerechten does, Daniel Boulud. There's been an explosion of high-end dining in New York City that is counterintuitive, frankly. But the rich people. The rich eat. They like to eat and they don't mind spending. And by the way, you can't open that restaurant in Lubbock. Much as I love Lubbock, it wouldn't, by the way, the one restaurant in Lubbock that was a fine dining restaurant just closed. And I actually got to talk to the chef and he was really bummed because he couldn't get the community interested enough in it to support it. But this guy worked in some great kitchens, but it didn't work. And so you can't put that kind of cuisine in a market that can't financially support it and sort of get their arms around it culturally. But I love seeing it because it helps. Told you a little bit about the Culinary Institute. Those great kitchens help train great chefs. And those great chefs go all around the world and make food a really exciting thing to talk about.
That's awesome. Phil, thank you so much for joining us today. Our time has blown by, as it always does. Every time I talk to you, I always wish I had more time. You're such a fountain of interesting information and your experiences, and you're always doing new cool stuff. So it's not like you're just talking about the past. You got today too. So that was a long way of me saying thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure to be here with you folks who take such care and such, in my view, such pride in doing the hard work, the research. Talking about all the stuff you do after the research, is the fun part.
Yeah.
But I mean, you actually do the research. So I'm honored that you asked me to join.
Where I'm just thinking, when you say that, I'm thinking about us making by hand databases of celebrity restaurants that are in hotels, and then figuring out what the rents are at those hotels and all that stuff. Yeah, that's a lot of the hard work.
Admittedly, I got very hungry.
Keisha does the heavy lifting on a lot of that stuff. So bravo. For folks out there, if you want to hear more interviews, audio, retail tours, and new research insights, you can subscribe to Where We Buy on the iPhone podcast app, on Spotify, or you can find Where We Buy wherever you get your podcasts. And we're also on the web at wherewebuy.show. Our theme music is Run in the Night by the Good Lords under Creative Commons license. All right, that's a wrap.
Awesome.
That was great.
Thank you, Phil.